Okay, welcome to the podcast today. We have Zach Foster-Crouch, who is someone that I've worked with in football for a long time now, has got a huge amount of experience in different areas of the game, and will provide some really useful insight over the next hour or so that we're talking. Zach, welcome to the podcast. As always, start with just telling us about what your coaching journey has been like from all the way back to the start to where you're at now. And then I'll probably just dip in and out of some of those bits there.
Yeah, no, cheers, Seb. It's good to be here. It's been a long time coming. Yeah, I think my journey probably similar to a lot of people. It started really, really young in terms of coaching. Was probably the fouled player, like we all are, and I probably suffered from probably a little bit of burnout towards the back end when I was playing. So I finished school at 18, and kind of my ambition wasn't straight away to go and coach full time. I kind of wanted my pathway to be slightly different. So for me, it was about understanding all the different dynamic and areas to what the football industry has to give, whether that's recruitment, goalkeeper coaching, outfield coaching. So for me, it was probably not necessarily trying to find my niche too early. It was kind of exploring all the different avenues that may sort of occur, as well as for me, I wanted to get a job which would fit around being able to coach in the evenings and being able to go to games in the evenings as well. So that was a big part of kind of the start of it for me at 18. So for me, it was 18. I went and got a job. I think I started 6 o'clock in the morning, finished 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and the rest of my time would be taken up either watching games or either sort of coaching sessions, whether it's after school clubs or evening sessions and evening centres. And then from there, it's gone on a good journey, hopefully.
So where did you start coaching in terms of those after school clubs, things like that, like evening sessions? Where did it all start?
So I worked for a company called Pro Soccer Academy. There was a local company that sort of just started. They'd sort of just finding their feet. They're a big company now. And for me, it was about going to trying to do as many sessions as possible with as much variety as possible, whether it's after school clubs, one-to-ones, birthday parties, just trying to get as many different experiences of coaching kids of all different ages, abilities, genders, different sports. I just wanted to get as much experience doing that as possible.
So yeah, I similar to you, done exactly the same in terms of and I think the value I got from coaching loads of different people, different standards of players, etc., really helped. Right, let's go straight into it then. Do young coaches do that enough now?
No. I'm very. This is kind of one of my things that when I speak to young coaches now, I kind of talk to them about my pathway and my journey. That worked for me. I was so scared when I went into coaching of probably burning out and coaching too much. So I wanted to make sure I was only really coaching an hour, 2 hours a day, just while I found my feet. But I'd coach every single day.
Yeah.
And that was important to me that I had stability financially. When I was 18, I was earning my own money away from football. And then if I could eventually make it into a career, then great. I didn't want to get sort of blindsided by how tough it is to make full-time money coaching football straight away. I think, to go back to your point, no. I think coaches, for me, again, my journey was I volunteered coach for 2 or 3 years before I earned a penny. Yeah. I had to do pick up a lot of the sessions that other people didn't want, and then it was a case of just trying to put myself in as many situations that's going to make me uncomfortable when coaching, whether that was coaching in a different area, coaching a new team, coaching a team that was old than what I was used to. It was just, to me, I wanted to try and make myself as uncomfortable as possible. The sooner I found that out, then the more potentially I would either want to do it or not want to do it. I wanted to find out early rather than later.
So one of the reasons I really wanted you on the podcast was the journey you've gone on, which we're going to go into more detail now, to get into football full time. I think it's been a brilliant journey, and it's something that I obviously, when I deliver the coaching courses, I'll always say there's people on that say they've got the aspirations to go full time. Some of them probably have got the aspirations but haven't got the work rate to do it. And then there's the few that you see that you go, they've got something, they've got some potential. So, I mean, I've pushed people onto there. Obviously, have conversations with you about your journey of Luke was one of them, wasn't he? Like,
Yep.
people that have then gone to talk to you, and it's trying to help them people. And there's people in the area. There's a coach that's just lost his management job somewhere. I won't say the name, but he went on a long journey of networking, meeting players, going to work at a different level, going to coach everywhere and stuff like that. And it's some people succeed once they get in the game. Some people don't succeed. That's fine, but the people that have really put the work in to get there have worked really hard to do it. And I think that's what a lot of people don't understand is what does it take. So on the coaching courses, I'm always saying there's people that say, I want to work full time in football. I want to do this. And I'm like, you can do it. It is possible to do. And I'm a big believer that we shouldn't dampen people's kind of ambitions, but they need a reality check on what it takes to get there.
Yeah.
And how hard it is and the sacrifice you have to make. But it is possible to do, but it's difficult. So can you talk us through, right, that is your kind of foundation?
Yep.
Right, what's the kind of middle bit between the foundation and working full time, would you say, in your journey?
Yeah, so the middle part was probably when I went to academy football.
Yeah.
So I went into academy football. I'd been coaching 3 years, went into academy football at 21. Was far too young, wasn't ready. But to be honest, in my defence, I had a really good personality with players, and could probably not necessarily fake it, so I make it, but I could probably get away with it for a little while in respect of probably not having as much detail and knowledge as what I needed to, but I could probably get a tune out the players. So yeah. I think the two counteracted each other. So I went into Leyton Orient when I was 21, took the under 13s, was a really good group. I think in the end it was, 6 of them went into playing the Football League. And I carried that group through, 13s, 14s, 15s. And then gradually, probably after 6 months, I kind of felt that actually I do belong here. For the first 6 months, I hated it. I hated the travelling. I hated how much I would get interrogated by the academy manager, by all the full-time staff. But that was for the greater good of making me better as a coach, and wanting to get the best out of players.
Sorry to interrupt there. How did you get so that journey from coaching at pro soccer and grassroots into the academy? How did that happen?
Yeah, I originally I knew someone, very good friend of mine, Pete Gill, went in as YDP lead. He says, "Listen, I think your face might fit here. Even if you're not ready, give it a go and see how you get on." Yeah, I appreciate we have a lot of conversation as coaches about it's not what you know, it's who you know. Absolutely. Yeah, that's a massive part of football. Yeah, Pete was a player I played with. Right. So that's how I got my connection with him, and we stayed in touch. So I was probably quite lucky. I got an opportunity which I probably shouldn't have got, in all honesty. But I probably, for me, in my defence again, I worked harder than anyone else to make sure I kept it.
See, I want to disagree with you there. In terms of, did you get? I don't think it's lucky. I think it's prioritising. Like if someone goes into a job like that, like Pete did. Yep. He's under scrutiny from everyone above him. Yep. So he's like, I need to bring people in that I know. One, I can trust them. Yep. 2, I know will work hard enough, and 3 will represent me well. Yeah. So I think this is the bit people are missing out on. Is you do years and years and years of work without knowing you're doing the work. It's how you come across, how hard you work. Yeah. Like your attitude to it, because then people will want you around them when they need to be successful themselves. So I get what you mean. And then football is who you know a lot of the time, but you've got to create and forge those relationships, which is the big bit a lot of coaches need to develop now, is that networking relationship part of it, and think about how they represent themselves, how they come across to people, because you are always trying to forge that. You're forging a career as soon as you start, and in every action you do, and every action you take, and every relationship you build. So, yeah, sorry, I just jumped in on you there, but I was keen to know that, because a lot of coaches will say, right, grassroots then academy. Well, what are those steps to get into it? And obviously now, interrupting, going on to your time at Orient. You probably forgot where you was at.
Yeah, no, I think going back to what you said, no, I agree. Now you've said it that context. I think for the club, It was a club not a lot of people wanted to work at.
Yeah.
It was in London. They didn't pay very well. I was probably a safe pair of hands. I could communicate with parents about the journey, about in regards to academy football and what it represented for me. And I think the players felt like they was with someone they could trust, who was actually, maybe potentially a little bit out of his depth, but actually would hopefully give them as much as what they need to kind of flourish moving forwards. I think from there it was, so I spent three years at Leyton Orient, loved it there because it was a completely different demographic of players that I'm used to working for. It was very much players were there because they wanted to find a way out of London.
Yeah.
They wanted to find a career. I wasn't used to that. I grew up in Maidstone. I still live now. It's a good area. There are loads of opportunities for people. There's loads of different sports. There's loads of different facilities they can go to of an evening. Whereas when it was working sort of South East London, it was very much we're training 2 hours a week, and this is going to be the best 2 hours. I'm going to give it my all. So for me, that demographic was the bit I loved the most about it, because the players were just hungry to become footballers. Didn't see any other pathway for them. So I felt for me that was the most exciting thing about that. So spent 3 years at Orient. While I was on my Advanced Youth Award, I met Brian Ball at Gillingham. Had some really good conversations with him. I think for me, the busier I was getting with work outside of football, the commute to London was really challenging, going through the Blackwall Tunnel every day. So I had a conversation with Brian. Said, Brian, I'm probably looking to try and get away. So it's probably taking up too much time travelling. Is there anything you have at Gills? Just based on the conversation we'd had, I really like the way you've spoken about how you do things, and actually I think I might be quite a good fit for what you're potentially trying to do here. So Brian got back to me, and I went in with Ponty. Doing the under 12s, and loved it. It was completely different, and there was no real differences. The players were completely different. Parents were completely different. It was a really warm, welcome environment.
Yeah.
So I'd gone from sort of potentially two polar opposites at the time, and it was actually the first time I'd actually worked with another coach in the academy. So with Orient, it was very much lack of staff. You're on your own this week. It was actually nice to bounce ideas off somebody. I think I didn't probably appreciate it as much as I do now in respect of how much Ponty knew Gillingham as a club.
Yeah,
He'd been in the academy system for a long time and knew how it worked, knew how things needed to be done, knew how sessions need to be structured. And actually, for me, that first year, I learnt tons about myself as a coach. Actually, my coaching behaviours, how different demographics and geography to where clubs are located makes a huge difference, and you can't coach the same way. And then actually, for me, it's also parents' expectations. Yeah. That was completely different as well. So for me, it was, although there were similar age groups as to what I worked with, actually Gillingham gave me a completely different aspect, and it was a completely different way of doing things, which I found brilliant.
I think so. It's interesting about this conversation as well. So far, Ponty has dug me out because he's not been on the podcast yet, but I've told him his time's coming. So far, I've talked about everything except for technical, tactical.
Yeah.
And a lot of coaches now will focus heavily on that technical, tactical stuff, but actually, everything else around it is massive. And you going all the way back to where you said earlier, we was chatting about how you behave in an environment, how you behave in a first team environment, how you behave in an academy environment, the differences to that. I remember when I first obviously got an opportunity at Gills, I'd been spending time going up watching the sessions.
Yeah.
Brian allowed me to go up and watch the sessions, and a lot of the time I was looking at, well, how do the coaches act?
Yeah.
How do they speak? How are they around the players? And I learned loads from that, more than probably the technical, tactical stuff, which is another side of the game that's really important. So from Gills, what's happened from there? Because you've got two kind of parts. I would say from when I knew as well, when you was at Gills and stuff like that, that was your youth development side.
Yeah.
But you had another side of the game you were developing as well in terms of the senior side and your understanding, your networking, your analysis stuff. Can you talk us through that bit as well?
Yeah, I think for me, since I stopped playing, I grew up watching non-league football. So from it was a Blue Square Premier to the Kent League. So me and my dad, we would go and watch non-league football every single week, twice a week, Tuesday, Saturday. So that was my background. That was my background growing up. Didn't go to Premier League football. I don't go to it now. I would pick a a National League South game, National League North game, over going to a Champions League game. That's my sort of my pedigree and the way I was brought up. So from the minute I stopped playing, I would go to as many games as I could, just to get an understanding of who the players are, what's the level like, what if I'm going to be successful in senior football, what am I going to need to develop tactically, what is my recruitment going to be like if I do go down that avenue, and how much football can I watch in the next 10, 15 years, just to ensure that whether I go down a recruitment pathway or a coaching pathway, that I'm going to be best placed whichever way I go down. And when I do decide what my niche is, I'm ready to really act on it. So for me, a lot of my background has been on focusing on opposition, watching players. I'm 31 now. I think I've been to probably just under 3,000 games in the last probably 10, 15 years, and that's probably let alone how many I've watched online as well.
Yeah.
So it is an addiction to wanting to know every single player. How does it work? What are the differences between each level? If I'm working for a National League club, what should a National League player look like? What should a Football League player look like? And trying to divulge between the two. So that's been a huge part of my journey. I've always done it alongside coaching. It's made me a better coach in respects of tactically, just because it's that the whole 10,000 hours. Well, I'm a big believer in that. If I can watch 10,000 hours worth of football, for me, I should be able to divulge and break the game down well enough that should hopefully give me a good career potentially.
So yeah, I'm going to go for a bit of detail now, because it's something I've always been fascinated in. If I was like, Zach, can you go and watch our opposition next week? What's your process around that, from before you get there to actually what you're watching at moments in games when you're there, to writing it all up after?
Yeah, first step is always, what do you need? What do you need and what do you want? I've probably worked for 12 different managers with completely different. Some have got completely different backgrounds. Some want loads of information. Some want a few sentences. So for me, that's always what I ask. What are your expectations? What do you want to know? So that's always the first sort of part. Second part is probably I would start to a little bit of research, whether it's looking at some games online. It's a bit easier now with technology, and we have a platform called Wire Scout. So typically now, if I'm watching it, if I'm going to watch an opposition, I've watched probably 3 or 4 games already of theirs. For me, I'm looking on that last watch in person. That's kind of my last watch, and it's really either breaking down some narratives which I think are trends, or actually just looking at things that actually they're one-off sequences, and actually that might not be relevant for this game. So I'd spend a lot of time researching the opposition before. I'm quite laid back in respect of what time I get there for kickoff. I'd get to the game 10-15 minutes before the game starts. I don't believe there's a real narrative about watching the players warm up. I don't really see that in senior football. I've seen players rock up like they're not interested, they've been the best player on the pitch and they haven't broke sweat. I've also seen players warm up and they're really intense and they've been really, really poor. So I don't necessarily worry about the warm up, how they arrive. For me, it's about, okay, what happens in that 90 minutes? Typically at the minute we are very much on what's the shape, what do they do well, what can we exploit. Then it's very much set piece driven at the minute, because that's such a big part of the game. So I'd spend a lot of time looking at set pieces, who's the priority markers, what fitted are each of the players, something they do well, something they don't do very well. Although that sounds a hell of a lot of detail, it's not. It needs to be concise enough that when I present to the players, they're going to remember.
Yeah, and I find that interesting, because now when you said that, what would I want? So if I'm looking at the team that I'm working with, it would be, how do they play out?
Yeah.
how do they press, and then, like I said, the set pieces, because we're built around playing out from back ourselves, and a high press. So knowing those details would probably be the key things for me. But again, it's building those relationships, and so I know that if I'm like, do you know this player or do you know that player or this manager? You normally know most of them. In non-league, because that's where you've based your knowledge around. And I think, again, something that if you're going to get into the game, for younger coaches looking to get into the game, most of them, unless they have like a highly analytical background or went into a load of free stuff for high level clubs, most of them will probably start at lower levels. In my opinion, from what I've seen, most of football at the lower levels, not all of it, most of it looks completely different to what you see in the Champions League, Premier League. And we experienced that last year when we went on the FA Cup run last year. The more we got to play teams Conference South, etc., a lot of them were similar in terms of direct, strong, quick, powerful, got around the ball quickly as well, hard to beat, hard to break down. And actually, I don't know if you see it the same as me, but at the minute you've got top of the game, playing out technical, tippy-tappy, etc., tick-attack, or whatever you want to call it. Actually, right at the bottom level, Ryman South, a lot of teams are now starting to play that way. The bit in the middle looks to me, from what I've seen, I've not seen anywhere do much review, is still a lot of physical, like, decision making, being effective rather than based on an all-round philosophy of a purist philosophy, as you say.
Yeah, no, agreed. If I go back to probably 13 years ago, it was very, very direct. I think that's probably all across the board. I think as the years pass, the split is a lot less now. There's a lot of teams which will, for me, probably start the season playing one way. We'll have to change it in the winter when the pitches aren't great and players are injured. So what I will say is a lot of teams have intentions of playing out for the back, playing for the thirds. For me, it's about the ones that are willing to maintain it throughout the season, no matter what. That for me is very, 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 very limited. They're very, very limited still. But I think a lot of it is based around non-league. It is an effective way of how can we win games of football. I think physically, for me that's the biggest part of the game. In a minute, we're in a real trend, I think, as a country where physicality is absolutely huge. I didn't think it was. I think 3 or 4 years ago, I thought we went to more of a technical. How good are our players technically? I think it's now reversed, especially in non-league. We're looking for athletes now.
And I'm giving my opinion on this here, and I would say it's because if you're going to focus on purely technical to win games, and like possession-based purely technical, you've got to be really, really good across the board to deal with that against teams that are physical and strong. And right at the top level, there's not that many teams that have ever done that, realistically. Even if you look at the Barcelona team that were all pass and move, still physically strong, worked hard. Man City now, we're talking top level, the best players in the world, and they still need to work really hard. So in non-league, you're probably not going to get as many of the players that have got the highest level of technical ability because they won't stay in non-league. They'll push up.
Absolutely.
But the physicality, the physical side, and actually, it's not discrediting non-league players because they can play. They are technically very good, and that's increased massively over the years of the players that have come through. But if you haven't got the physicality, the desire, the work rate, I don't think you've just not got a chance, in my opinion.
Yeah, no, agreed. I think we're going to go through again, and I'm trying to predict trends here, which I think is really difficult. We're going to go to a period soon where there'll be more players that are signed from non-league to Football League clubs than there will be coming through those clubs' Cat 3 academies. And I think that's a real shift in player development. I'm very big on, I believe young players need to go and experience men's football and senior football as quick as they can. As long as that environment is tailored for where they're at physically sometimes and where they're at mentally, I'm a big advocate of that. I think that's far more inclusive than what the 21s program is at the minute, based on a lot of the games I've watched.
Yeah.
I think a lot of the players that are going experiencing men's football early and senior football early are coming through quicker than what it's taking players in academies who are spending 2-3 years in 21's groups. I think I'm a big advocate of players wanting to go and play, and even whatever level that is.
And we've just done that at Ramsgate, where I'm working at the minute. We've got rid of the 23s, as you know. We've got rid of our under 23s. We've got a really talented group of 16-year-olds, under 16s, a couple of 17-year-olds that are very good. And we are getting all of them straight into men's football now. Lower level men's football, but still competitive men's football, because we believe that's their best chance of progressing and making it to adult levels.
Yeah, and I think as long as there's an element of control in the environment, and there's an element of the players' welfare. Yeah. Are they ready for that? Because there's also a batch of players that do develop a lot later physically, and are not quite ready to go into men's football at 16, 17, 18, or sometimes even 19. So I think as long as that environment is controlled, and it is suited around them learning and getting loads of repetition and a chance to face adversity early, I think the quicker players can be in senior change rooms, I think the better, in my opinion, it's going to be for them moving forwards. But also the risky run is, if you get it wrong early, it's potentially a lot more damaging than it is waiting a bit longer.
Yeah. How would you judge that on a player by player basis?
I think it's always, and you'll find we've probably been speaking, 35, 40 minutes. It's, for me, not about technical, tactical. They play huge parts of it, of course they do. It's the way the game is. But for me, it's about actually personality and character. Do they love the game and want to be there? I think is the most important thing. Are they willing to face adversity? Can they take critique? Can they take a battle? And actually, what is their mindset when there's an emphasis on winning? And that's really important for me, that before we even speak about technical, tactical, is their mindset ready to be in senior football? Then physically, can they also handle it? If they can't handle it, then that's going to be detrimental to the technical and tactical side. Then actually, do you know what? If they can adapt technically and tactically, and they can know, I think this is the biggest thing I emphasise to young players: know what you're good at, know what's going to keep you in the first team, but also know what your limitations are, and know what's going to keep you out of the first team.
Yeah.
And making sure you know, listen, these are the attributes I do really, really well. These are the areas, listen, in time I'm going to have to work on. It's going to stop me progressing. I think sometimes we don't spend enough time articulate it that way. This is what's going to keep you in the team. This is what's going to keep you out of our team moving forwards.
And so going back to youth, the next question was going to be on the difference between a youth development environment and first team environment. And something you said there that I think academies have done quite well in my experiences is they've got players that when they've got to 15, 16s, they're going, what is going to get you a contract?
Yeah.
So actually, it might mean your position's about to change. It might mean you're going to play there instead of here, or you're going to focus on this, because now you've got to prove that you can be effective in an environment where you need to win. And that's a big change, I think, for some players, especially when they've gone through this nice environment of the winnings. And academies are different, but no focus or emphasis on the winning, and it all been on the development. And when does that need to change is always a battle, I think, that people need to have about when does winning become important, to change their mentalities. But what would you say for you in coaching environments now? You've worked in both seniors and youth development. What would you say the biggest differences are, and how do you change your approach as a coach to make sure you're effective with those differences?
I'm going to go right back to the start. I think in this country we do a really fantastic job now. We don't set winning as our metric. We set developing very, very young. I think that's massively important. I think if you try and be all based on results, it is detrimental to technical, tactical development, especially for me when you're younger, and sometimes even physically. I think it has to get that balance. I think in academy football, it's that difference when the FA Youth Cup starts getting introduced, and when you are 16, 17, 18, I think that's really important then. That's a really prestigious competition which you're judged on results. But I also think it's really hard for players to then put themselves in an environment where suddenly it's been not non-competitive, but suddenly in academy football you're playing for something when you've not had any experience in playing for results. So I think sometimes we can. I know at 15s there's a floodlit cup now.
Yeah.
I think sometimes we can be so protective of players about things not being competitive that when we give them opportunity to be competitive, actually mentally the players aren't ready for it. The biggest thing for me is, I think that the biggest differences I see is that accountability. So I look at in senior football, it is you find players are more accountable for everybody else as well as themselves. When it's an academy football, it's very much individual based, and actually you don't see the concept of necessarily working in the team as much as you do in senior football. I think your approach when you work in academy football has to be very, very self-centered in respect of, I need to do everything I can. I work for these players, and I need to give them everything I can that they can go and progress. And whether it's, I used a great example in the 14s at Leyton Orient, I had a fullback that really struggled defending 1v1s. So I needed to put him in as many situations in games where he was defending 1v1s. Whether it was in his natural position or in an area of the pitch where he was going to get more 1v1s, I needed to do that for his development. That wasn't the best decision for the actual game and the outcome, but that is what was needed at that period of time for that player to give him his best chance to learn and develop. So I think it's being able to distinguish between your pride of your team being competitive and winning, but actually that's not what the players need at the minute. The players need this and this, and they're going to suffer, and you're going to have to watch that, and you've caused that suffering. So you're going to have to then pick them back up. When you get to senior football and when you get to a bit older, players pick up on those decisions you make. So actually they don't understand why you're doing that, and you get made accountable for that. So I think we have to then shift from developing to actually learning to win, because when they get into a senior environment, that is all it's about. It's about winning, and there's very few clubs where it is about developing. But there's such a short life for coaches and managers now. They have to do all they can to win games and stay in a job.
I think it's one thing that my experience is mainly Cat 3 Academy.
Yeah.
So I don't know what the Cat 1s and Cat 2s do about this. But I think it's one thing that we can definitely across the country improve is that transition from development to winning. Whether it was, I proposed before, maybe you do one game a month where you say, right, this game we need to try and win this game. Doesn't mean we've got to win it, but we need to try and win it. But then I would shift the focus onto the players to go, right, in the team talks, you tell the coaches first, how can we win this game? Like, where can we exploit? What tactically are you seeing on the pitch? Because I think that accountability is huge. And that was just one idea. Whether that would work or not, I'm not sure. But I discussed bringing that in at probably 12s, 13s, 14s to go, right, it's something to learn, it's something to experiment. It's for you to analyse a game, because I think something that good senior players do is solve a lot of problems on the pitch when they see pitches happening.
Yeah.
I don't think we always give kids the opportunity to experiment with doing that.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
I think that's what I loved about Gillingham.
Yeah.
And I think that's what Brian was brilliant at. It was players always first, but there was also a context of sometimes challenging you in respect of what does the game need.
Yeah.
And that's what I liked about that side. However, listen, I've seen and been at clubs where it's completely different to that. I loved that way of thinking, because it's got me ready for senior football. It's what is happening in the game. We can spend so much time breaking the game down, thinking about the individual needs, but the better tactically and the better you understand the game, sometimes the more you can give those players those opportunities.
Yeah.
So I think there was always a context to the game at Gillingham, and I loved that stuff. I loved that side to it because it felt like you was always playing for something as well. I don't know what you can do longer term. I think it's really difficult to get a balance. I think we have to give players an opportunity to be competitive, and this is not always football as well. We need to give them a chance in life to be competitive at things. I think we are in a society at the minute where I don't want to use the word soft because it's not soft, but it's about, there has to be that element of being selfish and wanting to be the best. It's, for me, we always laugh and joke about it's a taking part that counts. Absolutely is. But actually there's got to be an emphasis at some point on, actually, you know what, I want to win and I want to be better than that person. I want to be better than my opponent, because that's the skills they're going to need for me when they go into professional game, if they're lucky enough to do that.
Yeah, and so on this, then you've gone through obviously this journey, watching all the games, doing the analysis, etc. Which, as well as working at Gills at the time at Leyton Orient, is your next step then into the senior game?
Yeah, I was very lucky. I was watching a lot of senior games anyway. So I'd done a lot of stuff ad hoc for a club called Harrogate Town. So I started with them just as they're touching the end of National League North, and I worked with them doing the opposition analysis all the way through to when they become a Football League club. And then obviously the chance came to sort of have a bit of a dual role at Maidstone, and it's my hometown club. I used to go and watch them as a boy. That was, for me, that's my Maidstone's my Man United, and that's what I always say to people. That's, for me, when that opportunity came, there was nowhere else I was going to go at that point. And for me, it was a dual role in respect of my background is I was a goalkeeper, so it was doubling up working with Tom Hadler, being a goalkeeper coach, but also focusing on sort of the recruitment, what players was he looking to bring into the club, and then sort of predominantly was based on what are going to be the opposition going to be doing this year. And so for me, that's the first time I then sort of combined both roles in senior football. And then 4 years later, we're still going.
So you've had a lot of success at Maidstone.
Yeah.
Obviously, a promotion in there as well, but last year's FA Cup journey. So for those that obviously don't know, do you want to talk us through kind of where you got to in that journey, and then we're going to touch on some details kind of within that.
I'm going to touch on something else you'd missed.
All right.
There's a relegation there as well.
There is a relegation there as well.
Yeah, and I think and it's really important. It's really important to mention that, because that's probably the worst year I've had, sort of career-wise. So much adversity, so much felt like an imposter, and that's, for me, the most important part of my journey that year. It's year one was won the league, brilliant. Year two was relegated, you finished bottom, conceded 100 goals, didn't win a game from October onwards. I think it was October, start November. Then to a point where we've now got to rebuild a squad in year three, and then obviously had the FA Cup run and a playoff run. But yeah, as much as the success it has, for me, the bad season still outweighs that. So, and that's an important part for me, back reflecting on the whole journey in the whole 4 years. It's, for the good there's still that one blemish in my record of a relegation.
Yeah, it's part of the journey, isn't it? That's it. But like you said there, what we talked about before, adversity for players.
Yep.
For coaches as well. And I'm still upset about us losing the playoffs last year with Ramsgate, where I was coaching. Still gutted about it, openly gutted about it, because we worked so hard for a whole year, and then we didn't get what we wanted. And then I suppose with a relegation as well, you're still working so hard, aren't you? But and football environment can turn from positive to negative very quickly.
For me, it's the only industry that you ever work in that everyone knows how you're getting on. My partner goes to work at a school. I don't know how her day is and how she's getting on at work unless she tells me. Everyone knows how I'm getting on at work at 4:45 on a Saturday. Yeah. So I had a year of just getting beat 4-0, 5-0, 3-2, 2-1, would get a 0-0 in there. And then pretty much, this was the year, as soon as year two finished, it was I didn't go away. I think I took one day off in the summer, and the rest of it was just, didn't ever want to feel that adversity again. Nothing in the world could have prepared me for it, in respect of how bad it gets when you're losing and continuously losing and walking into games knowing you're not good enough. So for me, it was about, as a coach, no one could have ever prepared me for that. And then into FA Cup run. Yeah,
so let's flip it to the positive. Yeah. Talk us about, obviously, just tell everyone, obviously, where you got to, who you played along that journey, and then we'll go into the detail of it.
I think the year before We'd lost to Needham Market, who was 2 divisions below us. We'd gone to Needham Market. This must be 2022, 2023. We'd lost in the first qualifying round. We was absolutely horrendous. It should have been 3 or 4. We was lucky. The game the score had no reflection on the game. And we'd sort of said in the summer, let's have a good FA Cup run. In our wildest dreams, couldn't have ever imagined what would kind of evolve over the next 6 or 7 months. Probably the most incredible. It will be for me. It will take a lot to ever beat that in respect of what I go on to achieve, and if I don't achieve anything again, that's one of the most special times. I think it's my hometown club. To see the effect it had on the community, that was the best. Yeah, that was the best thing about it. We played 8 games. I think we started off Steyning Town, Steyning, Winchester, Torquay, Chesham, Stevenage, Barrow, Ipswich, Coventry. So I think of those 8 games, 6 of them was away. We only played 2 games at home. So we travelled. We spent the whole of sort of November, December, January travelling, and just every FA Cup game we just seemed to win and had these incredible moments, and that was tops off for me at Portman Road.
Yeah, top of the championship, were they, at the time?
I think it was second.
Second.
I think we'd spent, just sort of breaking down some analysis, which, to give people a little bit of context, it was, I think I'd watched every single game of Ipswich on the lead up. The 3 weeks after beating Stevenage to Ipswich, I'd pretty much watched every single game.
Are you watching that thinking, how are we going to win this?
It's really funny you mention that, I went to Ipswich, Leicester on a Monday night it was at Leicester, and we played Ipswich on a Saturday, and I just left and couldn't sleep. They was that good, and I kind of knew whatever team we put out and whatever team they put out, they are going to be so far ahead of us. It was, and for me, it is a fact of this is going to be on telly. It's on 12:30. I don't know what's going to happen here. And I remember waking up the next day and said to the partner, I said, it's Saturday is going to be real, real tough. And I've never ever gone and watched a game and thought that. So it was a complete shift. But yeah, I think between us we watched a lot of games. We went and watched them live once. And I actually was working at the time. I still had a job. I was still working 2 nights a week. One of my good friends there, a guy called Jamie, was a season ticket holder at Ipswich. So he actually told me on the Thursday, and it's all the prep we'd done, the most helpful thing anyone told me, he told me what their lineup was going to be, because he'd guessed it. Yeah. And it was pretty much 10 out of the 11 he got right. So of all the work we'd done, the most helpful thing anyone had done was someone at work working a night shift, and for prep. Yeah. So yeah.
So something we talked about there is obviously you're working alongside a manager who's played at that level. Yep. And there's always this debate that I'm on about ex-pros getting jobs or ex-pros getting jobs all the way from the top down to the bottom. Now, I see value in it. Yeah. I don't see any problem with it because I can learn everything technically, tactically. I can learn everything about opposition we're playing and stuff like that. I can't tell players how to play in front of 20, 30, 40,000 people because I've never done it. And that pressure of when you're under the cosh or you're trying to win a league or you're trying to stop being relegated, I can't do that side of it. So that's why I think it's a good thing people are in the game that have played the game. I also think on the flip side of it, a lot of people that have played the game get into it and get found out very quickly and then they don't stay in it. Yeah. So obviously you've got to know what you're talking about as well once you get in there to actually maintain a career. What was it like being with a manager who's obviously played at the top level of the game, and how do you think that benefits the team and yourself as a coach?
Yeah, we have our manager George Adakobi. He's played the top of our pyramid. He's played the Premier League. Our assistant's Craig Fagan, who's had a brilliant career as well. He's played in the Premier League. There was things which those two done on the day, which I would have never thought to do or say, but it made a huge difference in the run up to Ipswich. And there was nothing in which I have not got a patch on the playing career they've had. There is stuff they said and done that day which I would never even thought to do. And I think that's to me where I see the value of ex-professionals being managers, as well as they're both excellent coaches, by the way. They give great detail, they lead a brilliant environment, but actually how they handled those big occasions. I'll give you a couple of examples. on the morning of the game, we had breakfast. We'd stayed overnight. Sort of George and Craig had give a really good speech, and Craig said, "Just going to do me one thing: is can you text all your families, thank them for everything you've done in your career, because this is probably going to be the pinnacles of your careers. So can you spend a bit of time?" And that was something that's just binded us all together, just that moment. And then on the way to the stadium, we actually got out of the car park, and George gave a really incredible speech in front of our supporters. Just things which I'd never thought to do, that made a massive difference just based on their experiences. And I remember having a conversation. We sat before the game, and I said, "Are you nervous?" And he sort of said, "No, I've played at Old Trafford for Sky Sports. Like this is our bread and butter. This is what we've done for our whole careers, and we're going to help you and the group get through it today." And they did. Like to give them credit, they not only got the game plan right, how they managed that whole day from kick-off to leaving the stadium was absolutely perfect. And I don't think there's anybody who's not had those experiences that could have delivered it on that day, what they delivered. That's the first time for me I really saw that value of, yeah, do you know what? If you're an ex-pro, it does really help, because there's nothing that could have prepared me for that day.
Yeah. And that is real. And I think this is slightly off topic, but looking at ex-pros, and obviously I coached a couple last year, and Mark's, who I coached last year, the one thing I took from him, who's not a coach yet, is he coached a little bit, but he's still a player. But the lessons for him to the younger players in the club we work at is he was the first. He would always text me like first thing Sunday morning, like, "Where's the game yesterday? Send me the clips, send me the highlight." Like, and he would sit there at 37 years of age and watch the game and watch himself and go, "Where could I be better?
Yeah.
What can I do better?" And I'm like, he's coming towards the end of his career. He's probably got years left in him. I can't see him stopping, but he is still analysing that all the time. And I always say to the young players at the club, like, are you doing that? Because someone who is up there and been right up the top is still doing that.
I think there's a narrative that gets built around, if you've played at the very top level, you have a work ethic to play at the top level. What has surprised me, all the coaches and managers I've seen that have dropped out of the professional game and they've retired, they're some of the hardest working people I've ever met. They watch a hell of a lot of football. And that's probably one of my biggest surprises working with George and Craig, is how hard they work. It's quite intense, the amount of work and detail they do. So for me, yeah, I can see that with playing at the top level takes a hell of a lot to start off with, to then try to go and coach. I think there's a lot of traits that get carried over as well, and I think that work rate is one of them.
So if we move that on to, because you obviously at Mason, you've got a lot of younger coaches, you've got a lot of youth teams. I've just mentored a couple of your coaches on a UEFA B licence who were both excellent. They were really good. Look at taking that a bit away from now, your experiences with those guys of being involved in the game and watching the game, youth development. What do you look for in coaches nowadays? So it's taking it away from players. You've got coaches coming into your youth system. You've got coaches that want to make a career. What do you look for in what you would see as a good coach?
The one thing, again, I've probably not spent any time talking about technical personality. What's your personality like? Can you engage players? You're going to deal with in your journey so many different characters, so many different situations where players are going from adversity on the pitch and off the pitch. Are you able to handle that? Are you able to manage an environment, whether your environment is an under 10s, under 14s or under 18s? Before I even worry about if you can coach, it's, can you manage first? Can you manage the players? Can you manage the environment before they even get out to the grass? Once they get out to coach, it's, can your sessions be as engaging as possible? Can you keep the players guessing on what's next? Can you keep them challenged? Can you give them a carrot of competition? And can they finish the session? A, they're happy. B, they're safe. Two really simple principles. have they learned something in the session? Are they going to go away thinking about the session? And for me, if you can tick those four or five boxes, that's what we want our coaches at the club to do.
Yeah.
I think for me is we can't teach them everything in one session, but can we just make sure they want to come back? They want to come back to next. If they do, the session will probably good.
Yeah. All right. So obviously with that then, can coaches learn and develop their behaviours? And if they can, how?
I think technical, tactical, those sides you can. I think you can absolutely go on and have more understanding of the physical elements, psychological, social. I think there's loads of research and studying you can do which will help you understanding of that. Again, for me, you're asking, those traits are very personal and personality based. That's not saying you're not a good coach if you haven't got those. I think that's an advantage. I think you can gain those by having a bit of a slower journey, but just getting used to coaching loads of different age groups. You have to, if you coach an under sixes and under sevens, you have to have a personality.
Yeah.
That's for me. There are parts of your journey which can help develop those for me, and I see it where I see coaches with fantastic knowledge, but potentially have rushed through to coach the oldest age group possible. We have a narrative in this country where whoever coaches the oldest group is the best coach. I don't think that's right. So for me, I think there's different elements of your journey you can do that will help build those traits and will be more confident and a bit braver in sessions.
So if I'm going to so I've got a coach tomorrow.
Yep.
And I'm going to go, right. And he's like, I want to work, he or she, I want to work in first team football, work in senior football. And I'm going, right, got a friend at Maidstone says you can go and watch a couple of sessions. What would your tips be for that person who's coming in to kind of watch or meet staff around it or be involved in and around that? What's your tips for people that are going into that environment?
I think the first of all is understand the intensity. What are the players' behaviours? What do the players need? The players' needs for me are always a must. It's for me again. You get into senior football, you must look at what the team needs. You probably won't know that if you just come in to watch a session. For me, it's about understanding. Okay, what is this group? What is the makeup of this group like? How many players? How do they engage in the warm up? How do they lead into practices? At what bits of the session did they really start working well? What I find with senior players is you have to ease them in some sessions, just because of what day of the week it is or where they're at in respect to the weeks. For me, it's not a case of looking at what they're getting delivered, what's being delivered. It's looking at all the elements around that. How does it set? What's the intensity? How long do the practices last? Not necessarily even looking at the practices.
In terms of the kind of social and building that relationship side, because you've built up a good network of all the non-league managers, players, etc. How do you build relationships with kind of management style? So if I was coming into Maidstone, or if I was going to another club, what would the best way for me, if I was a coach coming in, to act around those staff be?
I think it's that element of you must know your environment.
Yeah.
One of the biggest things I've found is coaches coming into environments and they have no acknowledgement of what's happened at the weekend. So if a coach is coming on a Monday and we've lost on a Saturday, it's likely it's going to be quite edgy, and we're going to have tough conversations with people, and actually we're going to be a bit more in eggshells with the players, and the players will be exactly the same with us, by the way. So it's knowing, okay, how do I act to start with? You must earn that trust. For me, it's that a little bit bruised when I say this. It's speak when you're spoken to.
Yep.
If someone asks for your opinion, go and give it as honestly as you can. Don't do it to please what you think they want to say. They're the best. The best people I've met as coaches are the ones that just want you to be as honest as possible. Then for me, it's understanding, okay, what does this environment need and what could I potentially help them with? It's not what am I going to do. It's what do they need in this environment that I might be able to help them with. It's not thinking about, well, I'm going to do this, this, and this because the environment might not need that. It's what can I do? Whether it's picking up cones, filling up water bottles, how can I bring myself into this environment really quietly, so they can earn my trust, rather than coming in all guns blazing.
Yeah, and that makes sense. And I think the trust thing's massive.
Yeah.
In football, and it is. I remember my first senior coaching stuff when deal with Kent League.
Yeah.
I was going in as coach to players, and I didn't think once about anything technical, tactical. It was all about, right, how am I going to approach the players? Because I've not played at a good level, so I'm not going to garner that respect straight away. I didn't know many of the players. Only a few of them I knew were from school.
Yeah.
And none of them knew that I was a coach.
Yeah.
So actually, I'm going into this environment. So my way of doing it was go in, don't just set up some high tempo stuff that's going to really engage them.
Yep.
Don't overly coach. Just set up stuff and then drip feed in little bits when I need to. But also set the standard that, don't be a pushover either.
Yeah.
Like that. And
I think that's going to lead me into my next point, and this is something I've always managed to time really well. It's when you're working with senior players, at some point there is going to be an occasion in which you either need to show the players you can play, or you need to show the players that you can coach. And whether that's coaching players when there's a little bit of adversity, if there's a sending off and you're really helping drive it, and that situation is completely on the edge, or whether it's, I was brilliant at crossbar challenge.
Right.
So I would pick a time when I was first starting at a club, I'm going to go and find the best ball striker, and I'm going to play crossbar challenge with them.
Yeah.
Because I'm an okay ball striker. So at least they then think, the 2 or 3 that are watching think actually he does.
He knows what he's doing.
He does know what he's doing. So for me, it's picking those moments to really show this is going to be my impact on the environment. This is what I can offer. I appreciate I'm not playing crossbar challenge at the weekends, but for me, that's a really quick win with players where they think actually, yeah, he's okay.
Yeah,
he's okay. And when on the coaching side, it's there's a moment where it might be an individual or a team. They're in adversity. I'm really going to help them, and this is my moment to show them now I know what I'm talking about. You can't do that in the first couple of weeks.
No,
it's impossible. They need to earn your trust first before you do that. Yeah, in my opinion.
So where do coaching badges help coaches with this, and where do they not help them with it?
I think they give coaches a real good framework of how to coach. I think it's also, for me, gives them an idea of terminology, how to set the basic principles of a session up. For me, your session will fail not because of your content. Your session will fail based on how you manage the session. In my opinion, if the session detail isn't great, but you can manage the session well and get players online, get players involved, I think the session will go better. If you can get the two, that's a winning recipe. But actually, it's for me how to deliver, how to engage. Is this what the players need? For me, that's the most fundamentals. I think they're really good in respect of. I think the FA are brilliant at it now about networking, putting coaches together, forcing coaches who have never spoken before to give them the opportunity to have a conversation and to speak about football. I think that's something in the FA and UEFA courses now. They force you to have conversations about football with people, and the environments are very much tutor-led but learner-led. Yeah, that respect is the tutors facilitate the learners and coaches to learn.
What could they improve then? If you could, I always ask this question, like if you could go in and, I'll give you 2 parts to this question.
Yep.
If I gave you free reign on 1, coaching courses.
Yep.
And 2, grassroots football in general.
Yep.
What would you change?
Coaching courses is an interesting one. I'm horrendous in courses. I have the biggest imposter syndrome you could ever imagine. I will sit and not answer a single question for a couple of days if I can get away with it. I think it's very much. I look at the transition between UEFA B and UEFA A. They are very different whether you are at a non-league club or whether you're done at 16s, 18s, 23s at a pro club. Although they're the same qualification, they are completely different in those two in those two environments. So I would streamline them in respect of there's a UEFA B and UEFA A, whether you're focused on youth development or senior football. That would be my first way of potentially changing it. I think the second part, grassroots football.
Just grassroots football.
I think the formats are okay. So I know they're changing again, which I quite like.
Yeah, I'm for the changes.
Yeah.
Loads of people are kicking off.
Yeah,
but,
I like the changes.
I think they're the right changes.
I do believe, again, less players, more touches. I think it gets players in tighter areas and it allows them to get on the ball and express themselves more. I'd like match days. For me, I'd like match days to be more controlled.
In what way?
In respect of parents can't encourage, parents can't shout out. I would have it as completely silent, coaches led. And I guess I would try and that would probably be the thing I'd incorporate.
Yeah, no, I like that. And the silent weekend is one thing that always amazes me. I hear loads of parents, loads of coaches go, "Oh, we've done the silent weekend. It was brilliant for the kids. They loved it." And then you go to the next week and they're all shouting again. And it's like, well, you've just recognised. And the problem is you get the competition between parents.
Yeah.
So if one set of parents go, right, we'll be quiet, but then the others all start shouting, it becomes competition on the side because they don't think they're doing their kids enough encouragement or justice. But that's what I've preferred about the academy system is just let the players play. Let the players play. Coming back to your point on the A licence, I still can't believe that there's not a non-league A licence personally, and it's due. I understand the structuring of how the staff are recruited, etc. But what you've just said, I'll go right back to the start of the podcast where you said you think more players are now going to come from non-league into professional football than academies into professional football. So we've got to do more to help and say develop the coaches. I don't mean it that way. Actually, we need to give them the opportunities to develop. Yeah. Because there's some really good coaches in non-league football, even in Isthmian level. Yeah. And once at the standard of coaches at Conference South National League, like those coaches should be being pushed on to develop themselves, also increase their network, because they might be the next set of coaches in the pro game as well.
I just think it's your journey. If you manage a non-league, your journey is completely different to if you're managing the football league. We see it in non-league where you are responsible for everything. Yeah, media, paying the players sometimes.
Unfortunately, it's probably, sorry to interrupt the it's probably going further away from it with most of the B licences now, from my experience, have been scheduled at weekends. Yeah. So it's like we had 3 or 4 people that were in the non-league game at Isthmian South, Isthmian Prem, who are like, well, I can't do it now because it's at the weekends. And I see the flip of that. It's not like people don't want to take the time off work. But actually, if you're aiming for a high level of coaching, like if you're doing your B licence, normally it's because you're trying to either earn something out of it or push it as a career. So you have to make that sacrifice during the week to go on it, because then the tutors can come out to your games at the weekends rather than being on.
I just think there are lots of players and managers and coaches now that go into the football league. Yeah, I think there's one every couple of weeks now. I just think it's something which I would just potentially incorporate, and again I'd use it just as a networking tool, as a networking tool as well. Yeah. So that would be my one thing.
Just before we get to the last part of the podcast, it'd be great if you could follow the TSC Coaches Club on all social media. We're on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. You can follow us for free on Patreon, and you can listen to the podcast on Spotify and Apple Podcasts, as well as on YouTube. If you could subscribe to those channels, it will be a great help to us. Thanks again for listening.
I was talking to Simon Hodge this morning, and we were talking about yourself, and he said that you're one of a lot of people can get into the game and get a foot in, but not many people stay in the game. Like, to stay involved and stay in it, you've got to be the right type of person, build the right relationships. And he also described you as a curious learner through his experiences of working with you, against you, and stuff like that. Why do you think he said that?
I actually watched his podcast last night while I was watching the cricket. About 2 o'clock in the morning. Listen, what I will say is he is probably the most enthusiastic coach I've ever worked with.
Yeah.
And loves coaching. I think for me, why I've stayed in, I think my work ethic hasn't changed. I think it's still the same as it was. It's still the same as it was 10, 15 years ago, if not maybe a bit more now. I think for me, there's a huge fear, and I think about it every day, of when I finish in football, and I'm finished, that the game's taken more from me than I took from that. And I see it with loads of people now that haven't worked in football. They're so bitter about football and the industry. And I want to, when I leave and when I stop football and I do something else, I want to know that me and my family have taken more from football than it took from me.
Do you think you'll ever stop?
I'm not sure. Yeah, I'm not sure. I've got a director of football he's 80 years old at the minute. So, yeah, I think I'm going to do it for a long time. But for me, I want to just make sure I take more from it than it ever takes from me. I think that's probably the basis of me doing it. It's a job for me. It's very much, I am very much in a results driven industry. It won't last forever. So I've just tried to make sure.
Yeah, and the reason I ask that is because you see people that once they retire, once they stop, that's when they kind of get tired and their bodies kind of go, oh, let's have a rep. But I just think the thing with football is, if you don't want to leave it, you never have to, because there's always a kids team that needs coaching, or there's games that you can always go watch and you can always analyse, and you'll be around people that you know in the game and stuff like that. And that's something that I think is really valuable about the game. And like you said there about your director of football, but even at the clubs now, you go up to clubs and you see the people there that have coached there or managed there, and they're now in their later years, but they're still in and around it, and football's a big part of their life.
I think it's also knowing, and I also have to be really respectful of everything that's happened in my career so far, that now I've had a taste of what it's like being in a championship environment, that it's going to be very difficult if I ever have to go somewhere else and I have to kind of start that journey again, because nothing's going to replicate what I think that moment will be the best moment of my career. I'm probably never going to replicate that. Yeah. So it's how long does that motivation keep me going? Yeah. And then it's also at some point for me, I've got to find a niche on what I want to do. Do I want to be really heavily focused on recruitment and opposition, or do I really want to coach? I don't think I'm enthusiastic enough to want to coach 3-4 hours a day. That's never been part of my journey. Do I want to go and tactically be a manager potentially? But actually, at the minute, I feel like I get the best of both. I kind of get the best of both worlds at the minute, and I'm not necessarily isolating myself down one channel at the moment.
Yeah, and that was one of my last question, but I'll jump ahead to it. Was what do you see as your future in football? Which you've pretty much answered there, but have you got a kind of time limit on when you want to decide what the rest of your path's going to be?
I'm not sure. I think an opportunity may arise which makes that decision for me. If I'm honest, I think that will be I'm probably not brave enough to make a decision. Something may arise in the future which makes that decision for me. And then it's also, for me, it's sort of linking back to what you said a minute ago. It's also to networking. I'm going to go back onto that point. I think it's something I've had to get better at, and being a curious learner for me is an element of loving football, loving what other people's thought processes are, love learning about the different ways different clubs do things. I remember this conversation I had with Hodgie was, we did a 15s game against each other, and I just wanted to know everything, why he did that. Didn't speak about my team. I just want to know everything, why you did that, because I liked that. And actually, you're incredibly experienced and done this a lot longer than I have. What can you give me? Yeah. And I think that's really important, that actually coach it. We all give something back to football. Yeah. And we give it back to this next generation. I think, and for me, the last point of probably why I've stayed in it for so long is I've had to understand society and people change, and in that I have to change as well. Yeah. And certain behaviours which I could do with players 5-6 years ago, I can't do them anymore. I have to put an arm around their shoulder potentially more now. And also with technology, I have to be more educated with technology, because that's the way football's going. And if I don't start learning, there'll be someone who's 20 years younger than me that can do things 3 times faster than me.
Yeah.
So I think it's knowing the trends in society and the types of players that are coming through with their personalities, and how's football evolving.
Yeah, no, that's great, and really true as well about how you can't be old school and stuck in your ways. I think we're seeing in the coaching world and the non-league management world, people that are still very old school and have not developed with the game. They can still have old school values and tendencies, that's fine, but ones that aren't evolving aren't lasting.
No.
And won't, and that's probably the case 20, 30 years ago when we weren't involved as well. Just the last thing I wanted to come at it from was the goalkeeper coach perspective.
Yep.
So how do you be effective as a goalkeeper coach in the environment you're in? How do you try to be effective?
I have to know what my goalkeepers want and need.
Yeah.
And I am the most least important person in that environment. I am there to facilitate what they need. And my sessions have to be designed around what they like, what's going to give them the best edge towards the weekend. I think there's an element when you're coaching outfield players, you can make it a little bit like a little bit about yourself, and you can be quite charismatic. I think when it's more isolated in where it's one coach, 2 players, I think that it has to be very much player. I think it has to be player led. I have to make sure when I'm giving points that they're going to make a real difference. I think for me the most important thing, which is really important, I think in coach, especially goalkeeper coaching, is about your service. When you're serving, how important that is. I relate it really similar to a point I made earlier about personality over knowledge.
Yeah.
Is sometimes very similar in respect of goalkeeping. If you've got really good service, goalkeepers don't mind that.
Yeah.
Goalkeepers like that. If you don't give them sometimes that information they need, but they know your service is always good and on point, you might get that outcome.
Yeah.
Because of what you're serving them. So for me, that's something we have to do better. Is service. So I still work on my service every day.
Yeah.
What was the question, Seb? Sorry.
Yeah, it's just about how you coach. So what I picked up there.
Yeah.
About how you coach goalkeepers, how you work. The thing that I've picked up there straight away is how do you get the balance of giving them. Sorry, not the balance, but how much would you say is, in a percentage wise, roughly, you trying to improve the goalkeeper through coaching?
Yep.
Compared to how much of a percentage is you facilitating the environment so the goalkeeper gets what they need to just be on top of what they already know?
Yeah. So that's a good question. Very age dependent.
Yeah.
In my opinion, I had Lucas Kovlan last year, was 33. He's not going to get any better. He's going through his peak sort of prime years now. He's done this far longer than what I've done it, and he's played at a really, really good level.
Yeah.
So for him, it is, Lucas, what do you need? If I see anything, I'm gonna tell you. I'm not gonna try and change your technique because you've done it for so long one way. I'm gonna advise you on a couple of adjustments you can make, but I'm not gonna change the way you play because you've been doing it this way for 18 years. What's the point of me changing it for you to go and play another 3 or 4 years? The younger goalkeepers that come in, then you can go a bit more on what they what
would you class as a younger goalkeeper coming in?
Anything between anything 18 to 25.
Okay.
They're still very very young. Then you can really put a good spin on things. I think in developing, you can be really hard on developing. I think between 25 to 35, they're just about starting to get where they're going to be.
They're like maturation.
Yeah. So I think it's just, again, it's knowing what a lot of it is based on. Like, I probably spend most of my week being a counsellor to them because they're ranting about the outfield players who just done on a post shooting for 15 minutes and they've saved 2, or they've had a bit of a nightmare at the weekend, or they've not had anything to do at the weekend. I'm trying to keep them engaged. So a lot of my role is still based around counselling them through the week.
Yeah.
So that's, yeah.
And what about if I chucked you into a grassroots session with under 9s to under 11s goalkeepers?
Yep.
How would you approach that, and what would you do there?
Make it as fun as possible. Make them love goalkeeping. If they love goalkeeping, there's more chance they're going to spend longer doing it.
Yeah.
I think it's the hardest position to find someone to do and to recruit a goalkeeper. So when they're young, they can get the fundamentals, but they can get the fundamentals by having as much fun as possible. I wouldn't ever try and do a session with 9 to 11-year-olds where it's massively structured, with massive amounts of details.
Brilliant. So, in a minute, we're gonna stop talking, and in a minute, what we're gonna ask you to do is do some of your sessions on a tactics board. So just your favourite sessions.
Yep.
It can be goalkeepers, outfield, whatever you like. But thanks for coming in. You've been someone I've wanted to get in for a long time, because, and I'll reiterate it now, that there's always this thing about people want what you've got, but they're not willing to do what you've done to get it.
Yep.
And I think you're a great example of someone that's worked their backside off to get to where you are. And that's been in different facets of the game, different areas of the game. People listening to this and now probably been like, how have you fit all that in? But it's basically hard work.
Yeah.
And you are something we talked about earlier, and we'll wrap up on it, was you're an advocate for younger people having making sure they're working alongside their coaching.
Yes.
What's your thoughts on that, just to wrap it all up?
I think it's really important that this is something I was really big on, and I learned it. I finished school at 18 and I went and coached full time. I lasted 6 weeks. Hated it. It was too much. I had never coached that much before. Was getting so stretched mentally with the workload, and I just couldn't do it. So for me, it was about finding a way. Okay, how can I find a way of where there's no financial pressure, and I'm doing this purely to learn, and hopefully I'll enjoy and like it. And then gradually over time, I might try and go full time. But actually, I'm going to try and learn a skill. I'm going to try and get a job, learn a different skill set, and not feel that pressure of having to rely on football as my income. So I'm a massive advocate of, do you know what? Although we want to get there and we all want to be full time in football, don't be in a rush. Don't be in a rush to get there. I think it's having that balance. Having that balance for me is really, 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 really important. As soon as you start doing something for money, I think your enjoyment goes. So I think you need to enjoy it for as long as you can first, and get yourself into a position where actually I'm ready to coach. I'm ready to coach full time. My life dictates now that I can coach full time rather than me dictating that.
Excellent. Great way to finish off. Thank you very much, mate. Brilliant.